Before I begin, I have to acknowledge and thank some of the sartorial choices that were made this morning for the family that feel behind you and see behind you. First of all, the number of people and the time when we're avoiding public gatherings, weather is bad, how many people came, pay their respects to Mitch, and seeing the colors that are interspersed in the crowd, know that Mitch's spirit is still very much with you and with all of us. Mighty God, Lord of the living and the dead, the hearts of your children who mourn are heavy with grief. Give them comfort. They are overcome by pain and tears. Help them to remember the triumph and the joy in the life of our dear Mitch Wainer. The prophet Shayahu Isaiah gives voice to our sense of sorrow when he says, Kol omer krav amar ma ekra. The voice says, cry out. I say, what shall I cry? Kol basar chatzir v'chol chasto tzitz hasadeh. All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. Yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. The grass withers, the flower fades, when the wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. And the very same prophet brings God's words of comfort to those who mourn. Al tira kichan, fear not, for I am with you. Al tishtak en Elohecha, be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will sustain you through my power. To begin the process both of remembering Mitch and offering comfort to his beloved family, we are very pleased to have the participation of a number of people, because not only was Mitch an incredible character, but the family that he and Susan created is absolutely remarkable, and they touch communities of which they are part. So I first of all would like to call upon Zach and Nina's rabbi, Joel Mikowski, to come forward with the song.
Psalm 121. Shir Lamalo, Tesenai Elehari Me'ayin Yavu Ezri Me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim Haaretz. Al Yitein Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanu Shomrecha. Yinei Lo Yanu Melo Yishan, Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai Tzilecha, Al Yad Yeminecha. Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka, Ve'yareach Balayla. Adonai Yishmorcha Mikol Ra, Yishmor Et Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmor Tzedcha Uvoecha, Me'ata Ve'ad Olam. I lift up my eyes to the mountains, and from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and your coming, now and forever.
Now I call upon Mitchell's Rabbi Blum.
Ichtam leDavid, Shomreini el Kichasi Siva. Chamart Adonai, Adonai Ata, Tovasi Ba'alolecha. Mikdoshim Asher Ba'aretz Hema, Ba'direi Kol Cheptzivam. Yerbu Atzvosam, Achar Maharu Balasich Niskehem Midam. Balasah Shmosam Al Sifasai. Adonai minas chelki v'chosi, ata tomich gorali. Chavalim naflu li ban'imim, af nachalas shafra alai. Avareches Adonai asher yatzoni, af leilos yisiruni chilyosai. Shivisi Adonai l'negdi samid, Kimi mini balemot, Lachain samach libi vayagel kibodi, Af bisari yishkon levetach, Ki lo sazov nafshi lishol, Lo sitain chasidcha liros shochas, Todieni orach chayim, Sovas semachos es panecha, Ne'imos bimincha netzach. Psalm of David, protect me, O God, for you are my refuge. I have said to the Lord, you are my guide, my benefactor. There is no divine being beyond you. I delight in the saintly of the world, in them and in those of unshaken faith. Others may multiply idols and seek strange gods. I will not share in their bloody libations. I will not utter their names with my lips. Lord, you are my allotted portion. You are my cup of life. I have been allotted pleasantness. Lovely indeed is my heritage. I will praise the Lord who has given me counsel. My conscience admonishes me at night. I have set the Lord before me always. God is so close, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart exalts, my spirit rejoices, and my body rests secure. For you, Lord, will not abandon me to Sheol or forsake your faithful into the depths of the pit. You will show me the path to life, to the full joy of your presence, to the bliss of being close to you forever.
And I call upon my colleague Jesse Olitsky, who has been really a Benbite person, almost part of the family, the Wainers, and has been with them so much, experienced so much with them, has been a source of strength.
Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echzor, B'inot esher bitzeni, Al mei menuchot yinaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni b'machlei tzedek leman sheol. Gam ki elech beged saleh lo irara ki ata imadi shiftecha umishantecha shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorarai Tishanta v'shemen roshi
Dishanta v'shemen roshi. Dishanta v'shemen roshi. Kosi revaya. Achtov v'chesed. Irdefuni. Kol yemei chayai. ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני, לאורך ימים. The Psalm of David, God is my shepherd, I shall not want. Adonai makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, and restores my soul. The Lord guides me in straight paths, for that is God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Tradition teaches that when we don't know what to say, we begin by chanting psalms because there really is nothing to say. It's hard to get our words out. And as much as we chant psalms, the truth is Mitch was not really one who relied on scripture, on Tanakh, on Talmud. He had a different holy scripture, a different spiritual advisor that he turned to, his own Rebbe, Jerry Garcia. And so, like an angel standing in a shaft of light, rising up to paradise, I know I'm going to shine. What the Grateful Dead is saying is not so different than our own tradition. We say, Tei nishmatot Torah b'torah chaim, that our loved ones' souls are bound up in our lives. I believe it. Mitch now, his soul is bound up in the lives of his beloved family, his wife, children, siblings, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, cousins, his community. And he will continue to shine bright in our lives, as bright as those Hawaiian shirts that he wears. I have to be honest, growing up in the Wainer home, I only thought for a long time that he only exclusively owned Hawaiian shirts. I think if it was up to him, he would have only owned Hawaiian shirts. Between that and his love for the Grateful Dead, which if you were unsure, he would quickly show you his CD collection. If that wasn't enough, he would peel back his cheek and show off the sketched Grateful Dead dancing bears on his dental implants. Growing up, Mitch and Susie welcomed everybody into their home. It was the go-to place in high school. You want to party, even with Mitch and Susie there, to sleep over, to spend Shabbos together. We thought, wow, Mitch is that chill, relaxed dad. Until you stayed up too late. Because the scariest thing for a teenager was to experience Mitch Wainer at 2 a.m. when you were disrupting his sleep. But still, truthfully, even then, the morning would come and he'd return to his teddy bear self. That meant different things for different people and different relationships. He had unique relationships with each of his children and grandchildren. With his family, with his friends. But he loved them dearly. All of them. By having a unique relationship with each, his love was represented differently with each. And it's a time like this when you wish you just give one more hug to that teddy bear of Mitch Wainer. Like an angel standing in a shaft of light, rising up to paradise. When we say that our loved one's soul is bound up in the bond of life, we mean that they remain with us as long as we keep them alive within us. We share stories and memories. And the more memories we share, the more stories we tell, the brighter his light shines. So more than reading Psalms, we share stories. Keep Mitch's light shining bright. So first I want to invite up Mitch's brother Rob to share some thoughts.
Thank you, Rabbi. I want to thank you all for coming, first of all. We're all here today because we all know Mitch, a larger-than-life character who loved to hug and kiss and love everyone. I'm going to tell you what it was like to be Mitch's younger brother. It was a glorious place to be. To Mitch, I was Robbie. Only person that called me Robbie. He always called me that no matter where or when. I was his Robbie. And as I grew up, it was great to tell everyone I was Mitch's brother. Mitch was my fantastic older brother. When we were young kids, I would ride on his back and he'd crawl around the room, or I'd sit on his stomach and pretend I was driving a car and he would make all the sounds. As I got a little older, Mitch started doing stuff that I thought was so cool. Playing rock and roll records, playing in a band, growing his hair long. He paved the way for me with my parents, so I could do all those same great things. He always bought really cool cars. In high school, he had a Triumph sports car, which to me was unbelievable. And then he had a Mustang convertible, which, in the day was amazing. But even as I was a young teenager, Mitch always made time for me. I realize now it was a lifetime trait of his to be generous with his time to everyone, but especially me. If I ever asked him for a ride, he would give me a ride, and my friends. He would talk to all my friends, and he always treated me and them with respect. In those days, we were all always laughing, because Mitch had a crazy sense of humor. Even when he went to college, he would ask me if I wanted to come down for a weekend and spend time with him and his friends. Now, there's 5 years between us. So asking your little brother to come down to college was a pretty big deal for me. And when I think about his doing that, it was just amazing. Imagine me at 15 and 16 hanging out at Mitch's frat house with all his college friends. We formed a bond that would stay strong our whole life. My friends all knew Mitch, and as time went on, they became his friends too. Growing up, he introduced me to his world of entertainment. The Three Stooges, horror films, rock and roll groups, blues music, and of course, the Grateful Dead. I admired his uncanny ability to remember every small detail about the subjects he was interested in. Things like he was incredible with the details, remembering an actor's name in a movie you were asking about. Not only did he remember the actor's name, but he would tell you every other movie the actor was in. The dates, the times. Little did I know at that point, this uncanny ability to remember details is going to help us in our business later in life. Mitch loved his family. Being a husband, father, uncle, brother, son, and grandfather were his happiest moments. He would light up telling me a story about his kids' accomplishments, his beautiful grandkids, his loving wife. We spent 32 years as partners in business together, and our desks for most of those 32 years were right opposite each other, so we spent a lot of time talking. And he would tell me with a big smile on his face about each one of his kids and what they were doing, and then his grandkids. And he would always sum it up and say with a big smile, "What more could I ask for?" As partners in business, Mitch again was a glorious partner. He always supported me, encouraged me, respected and complimented me. If we ever argued, it was always because I started an argument. He never did. We'd end the argument and go along and we'd forget it. Mitch was such a positive person all the time. Every day he would come in with a great smile on his face, ready to do the best he could and to encourage everybody else to do the best they could. And in our business, everyone got to know Mitch. Who couldn't get to know Mitch? We all see who Mitch was. His slightly crazy sense of humor, his Hawaiian shirts and hat, and his big smile. All of our employees were like his family, and he would try to help them all. His love of details, as I mentioned earlier, he knew every type of envelope. We were in the printing business, if anybody doesn't know that. Every type of paper, exactly what it cost. He ran the finance side of the business. He was great with math. He helped organize everything. when I would ask him a question about the bank account or, a particular job, he knew down to the penny what was happening. And I never had to think about it. I knew he was right there. He helped to build Sunset Printing, and his legacy will live on there with his nieces, nephews, and employees. I know that the other people who come up are going to tell you all sorts of other aspects of Mitch. Most of them, or some of them, we all know. His obsessions, his love of many different unusual hobbies. But I hope that you see that being Mitch's younger brother was just a great place to be. He was a person in my life I could count on for his strength, his sound advice, his humor, and support. Thanks, Mitch. I'm still your Rob. I hope we see each other again for the next life.
Now I want to invite up Mitch's sister, Susie Shear.
Good morning, everybody. It really fills my heart to see everybody here and to know there's so many people on Zoom as well. And all the Wainers, all the Shears, everybody. We send so much love and we thank you for being part of our send-off for Mitch. Rob is a hard act to follow because as brothers, they were an unbeatable team. But I'll do my best. I was the only sister. I was squished in the middle, and I'll tell you our story. It's my privilege to share these few remarks about my awesome big brother, Mitch. Everybody knows him as the Hawaiian shirt wearing, Grateful Dead loving guy who was many times larger than life. After decades of reading every book in sight, Mitch was probably the smartest person that I knew. And I always said, if I ever was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and I needed a lifeline, it was definitely Mitch I would call. Mitch was the first male grandchild on my mother's side of the family, and he became a mini-me of our grandpa Jerry, my mother's father from Brooklyn, who brought him into New York City as a preteen and taught him how to become a coin collector, a numismatist, and a stamp collector, a philatelist. Eventually, Mitch expanded his love of collecting, as everybody knows, to vintage cameras, radios, neon signs, clocks, and so much more. And as Rob said, his ability to incorporate and regurgitate details was absolutely unbelievable. And just like Grandpa Jerry, Mitch was known for picking up treats and surprises for friends and family and his grandchildren, just to make them smile. As Mitch got older, he began to resemble our other grandpa, Grandpa Jacob, my dad's dad, who always had a bushy mustache and a full smiley face with soft hazel eyes, and both of them had a teasing manner with a heart made of gold, and would brag about you behind your back when you weren't listening. Many of you know that Mitch and I went to college together. Back in the day, I started Douglas when he was already a junior at Rutgers. And it felt like having him on campus was my in, since he had a car and he was a cool fraternity member of Sigma Alpha Mu, which everybody knew as Sammy. And eventually, Susie went to Douglas, and of course, Mitch became a fixture on campus. Sometimes I'm asked, what was it like being the only sister and having two Wainer brothers? Of course, it was very, very special. I guess I was a tomboy early on, always trying to keep up with them. Mitch and Rob always had the strong brother bond going on from their teen years, and I hear from their toddler years. And of course, they later married their sweethearts, Susie and Hope, who were close childhood friends. And then as brothers, they were partners for decades, as Son said. You can't find a bond like that. And it was very special being the sister in the middle to both of them, and especially Mitch. I was truly happy to grow closer as we settled down and started our own families. Gary and I decided to send our kids to HAMC, largely because Susie and Mitch were already sending their kids there. And Mitch used to brag, as people often heard, that he was an analog guy in a digital world. But I knew that if it was my birthday, without a doubt, the phone would ring and it would be my brother Mitch calling me to wish me a happy birthday. And he also had his cute names for me. Suzel, Susie Q. You know, he never really had just a straight name, but it was always an affectionate name, and I really cherish that. Even as adults, Mitch took his role as the oldest sibling very seriously, and he volunteered to manage Grandpa Ted's finances and household after Grandma Lila passed away. And he made great efforts to keep in touch with long-distance relatives, especially Matt. And he was definitely the repository of the Wainer and Klein family history, including the culinary delicacies that we always enjoyed at our grandmother's and Nathan's Coney Island as kids. But in great detail, as Rob said, you could feel it, you could taste it. Mitch was very practical, but he loved his toys and his hobbies. Once he bought the coolest antique car that he would drive once or twice a year, and then he garaged it at my parents' house, sometimes to my mother's annoyance. He loved to go to concerts, play his music on his custom speakers, and reminisce about Woodstock. I think they ended up camping in the rain and the mud, but he loved every minute. He would go to crazy car shows and even drove to Pittsburgh every year to the horror movie marathons with his high school buddy. Probably one of my favorite memories of Mitch over the years were him sitting at the head of the table at a huge Wainer gathering at Mitch and Susie's home for Rosh Hashanah or Passover. And he would raise his glass high, get all choked up, and he would thank everybody for coming and talk about the specialness of being part of the Wainer clan and pulling everybody together as a family. And these are truly memories that Gary, my kids, and I will always cherish. And I thank you, Susie, for giving us those memories with Mitch. Mitch was a guy who was very clear on what he believed in and what he liked. Perhaps Mitch's greatest moment of clarity and wisdom was when he decided to woo and marry the girl down the block, Susie Adelson, whose mom, Phoebe, was also an art teacher. My parents thought Susie was terrific, but they were a little nervous, and they said to Mitch, "Don't date her and drop her, because we know her parents." And he said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." And then began a 50-year love story that produced 4 amazing kids and such special spouses and the most adorable 10, soon to be 11 grandchildren that they could possibly imagine. What a legacy, what a legacy. Mitch, you have given Lila and Ted and all of us so much to be proud of. I am certain they will be welcoming you with open arms and big hugs as you travel to the other side. And someday we'll all meet again. I love you, Carl.
We'll now hear from Mitch's children. First want to invite up Rachel.
This week's Parsha begins with Daber el bnei Yisrael vayikhu li truma me'et kol ish asher yitzbenu libo tikhu et trumati. Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from me from every person whose heart so moves him. My father lived his entire life in the way that his heart moved him. He chose to do things and be with people and experience the world in the way that his heart moved him. That meant that he was basically happy with every single thing in his life. Since I was 13 years old, and we pinpointed the date precisely through photographs, as you heard, he has worn only short sleeve Hawaiian shirts because they brought him joy. He loved the bright colors and the soft feel. So every day, winter or summer, to sunset, at home, here on Rosh Hashanah, to his parents' funerals, he wore a short sleeve Hawaiian shirt. He surrounded himself at home with so many things that brought him joy. Grateful Dead CDs, pinball machines, antique cameras, more recently, hundreds of regular cameras, Nixie clocks. He spent his life in a career that brought him joy, working at Sunset with his father, and then his brother, and then his niece and nephews, getting to be his own boss and leading the entire Sunset family. He ate foods and read tons of books about foods that brought him joy. No matter where you were traveling, he could tell you the best pizza place in every major city in the United States. And he could recount minutiae about diners across New Jersey. But none of that compared to his love of sloppy joes, which he lovingly schlepped to Boston, Washington, D.C., Provincetown, Baltimore, Brooklyn, to deliver to my brothers and me wherever we happened to be living, and which he probably introduced to most of you. He spent time doing so many things that brought him joy. Reading the New York Times and the Star Ledger every single day in a special chair from cover to cover when I was a child, watching baseball games at stadiums across the country, talking about the Mets with Zach, and then John, and then Noam, especially about how poorly the Mets were performing. Watching monster movies, and more recently, surfing the internet, buying gifts for everyone he knew. We were constantly receiving a never-ending supply of Hess trucks, English muffins, oranges, chocolate-covered Oreos, and way too many gifts for birthdays and Hanukkah that were always purchased many months in advance. But more than anything, he surrounded himself with people who brought him joy. He told us that he loved my mom from the first day that he met her 48 years ago, and he soon thereafter began mailing her containers of peanut butter when she went to study abroad in Israel. He told my brothers and me constantly that he had the best wife and the best kids in the whole world, and how incredibly proud he was of all of us. He learned tons of random facts about things that we liked or things that we were involved in, and he adored his grandchildren, making them laugh, often by saying something inappropriate, taking them for drives to see Christmas light displays and for milkshakes, and sneaking them Tootsie Pops whenever we weren't looking. My dad did not worry what other people thought. As far as I could tell, he was completely immune from social pressure. He didn't make decisions based on what would look good or sound good. He made decisions based on what would bring joy to him and all of the people that he loved. He was completely genuine. When my dad loved you, and he loved many people in this room, you knew it and you felt it. He could make you laugh so hard that you cried. And when you talked, he truly listened, making you feel like you were the only person in the world. By doing what his heart told him to do, he taught all of us how to do what was right for us and to do it with joy and love. I love you, Dad, and I miss you.
Next, I want to invite forward Josh.
As folks have said, Dad was a very generous person. He gave his time, he gave any sort of material gifts that he could. It was often, it was so much more than one would want, you know. The sisters you mentioned, huge muffins. Most people give one, give 13 different varieties. So many. And it was a sign of how much he loved everyone. The interesting thing was seeing when his generosity, when it would come across someone else who was as generous. I was at camp one time and he and Grandpa Ted wanted to pocket money. Both are very generous people. So one person takes out a bill. Second person takes out a bill. What is it? Am I getting money? Not that good enough? No. Put it away. Put it away. This quickly escalated into a bit of a shouting match. Bills were thrown onto the dirt and spat upon. Things ended up being fine in the end. But Dad was such a generous guy. He loved being able to do it. To me, it was a sign that's how much he loves people. And he wasn't just generous with people. As folks said, he loved to take an interest in what people loved, wanted to know what drove passion was. Whether, it was when one of us got into a certain school, he would then call us up, oh, what did you know that this school was started by this guy this year? Yeah, Dad, that's awesome. That's a beautiful thing. He would cut out articles from the newspapers we love to read, cover to cover, about restaurants that we should check out that were in the city, all sorts of different cuisines. Have you tried this? It's this sub variant of food from this one province in Sichuan, China. You should really check it out. Like, yeah, Dad, that's a beautiful thing. Thank you. And this love of food, as folks have said, it came out in so many ways. It wasn't just that he loved food, he loved different kinds, from barbecue to pizza to Szechuan. Dad wanted to travel, wanted to experience all of these different things, whether it was going to a very specific pizzeria that claimed to have a white clam pie, but never actually did. Or if he would take a very specific route to go up to one little snack bar that did fried clam bellies. He would take that route, even if it meant 30 extra minutes for it. He would travel down to Lockhart, Texas, because that was the only place you could get really good barbecue. And he took this passion into everything. It wasn't just a minutia of all these things. He had a real passion for it. Movies, and he would know all about the history of film as a medium. He would know about the styles of the different directors. As Robbie said, he knew so much about the different actors and how they were joined. Just play 6 degrees to look at the shrug every time. And he loved all different kinds of films. Some films, before they got mainstream huge, he still loved them. But he still also liked some that were cheesy action movies because he just loved all of these things. And he shared that with us. He loved to share it with his kids. All of these passions that weren't just his. He wanted to share them with everyone that he could. There was this one time my mom saw this film, Snakes on a Plane. They called up and they left a message. It says, hey, we just saw this movie. It's kind of dumb. Dad says, oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. And he then says one of the famous lines from it. Get these MF snakes off this MF plane. Mom says, no, say MF. He just said F. He says, no, 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 he said MF. Well, as my mom said, well, we have a difference of opinion. But Dad's encyclopedic knowledge, it was that. But all of these loves, they really paled in comparison to how much he loved to feel about his kids, his grandkids, and everyone that he knew. You know, oh, you know, so-and-so just got into this school, so-and-so just joined this profession. And so-and-so is able to paint with so many colors, you know, it's loved seeing what all of the loved to tell everyone about it. I'd like to think that if we can give a small fraction of this love, friends or kids,
Next, I want to invite Seth to come up.
So, this is what it takes to get my dad to come to synagogue. I've written this eulogy in my head a lot of different times. It always came out different. Because, as Robbie said, my father, Mitch, was really larger than life. He was a lot like a character written from a different time. Maybe John Belushi from Animal House, Sidney Greenstreet from The Maltese Falcon, Ricky Jay, the magician, if you knew, and all those guys resembled Dad. And in describing Dad as a character, whoever said clothes don't make the man, obviously, knew Dad. He was always in uniform, recognizable from afar, which was terrific for us kids. Didn't want to lose sight of Dad. I hear from people, oh, your father went by this way in Rockaway. And you never had to ask, oh, how'd you know it was my dad? But for a man who had literally no variety in his wardrobe, he was really insistent on us kids looking sharp. He could stop by Brooks Brothers and go shopping with us, the way Teddy Roosevelt would go shopping at Brooks Brothers going to war. 5 ties, 6 shirts. You like that size? Get it in every color available. One year for my birthday in DC, I got a stack, a rainbow, of 14 polo shirts. Thanks. He loved when our hair looked suave, thick, bleached white, like Billy Idol, when our ties were tied with big fat knots. He used to sometimes say, if I dressed real sharp, he'd say, you look like John Paul Belmondo. I didn't get that reference for about a decade. Look it up later on IMDb. Loving fiction, my father was a real believer in stories. He really believed in us kids. I remember really vividly once before I went to England, he took me shopping to, well, Brooks Brothers. And then we got to go to dinner. Sitting there, we're talking over steak. And he starts weaving this tale, and he says, you're gonna go overseas and you're gonna make friends with a country gentleman, and they'll have an estate and horses, and you'll go fox hunting, and it's all gonna happen. And I thought at the time, it's so cool. But I fell under his spell at the moment. He'd tell me later how I'd start at the bottom in DC, and authoritatively he would say, well, if I were mayor, I would want to do this. And often he would start kind of researching these characters in my life to get little tidbits of information, like who they married, where, he'd read that in the paper, figure out where they went to school. He put together these narratives of these experiences that we were going through, and at the time he'd say, yeah, Dad, that's great, yeah, good. But I think he kind of had that magic with reality. And he would get you to believe to the point that this would happen. After a time, I think I found myself doing the same and doing it right back to him. I remember such a scenario when I vividly told him in colorful language how I had found the person I was going to marry. As my son recently reminded me, Yoda says death is a natural part of life. Perhaps all of us have a similar story about Mitch. Today we can remember that better version he saw in us, or that future he described for us in wonderful detail. And I think that's really what it meant to love him. It was to believe for as long as that conversation lasted, the version of the world the way he saw it.
Finally, I want to invite Zach to come up and share some thoughts.
This week's parasha, Truma, is the first of 4 parshiot that focuses on the Mishkan, or God's portable desert dwelling. Framed as instructions given by God to Moses on Sinai, Truma describes the materials of the Mishkan, its furniture, its vessels, in minute detail. Sandwiched between a description of the golden menorah and the cloth that makes up the Mishkan, we find an interesting note about the project on the whole. Pay attention so that you can act according to their patterns that you are being shown on the mountain. My Father has always supplied those patterns for me. The enduring memory of my childhood is waking up on a Sunday morning with the wah-wah of the guitar and the dull bass emanating from the porch. As I approach, I feel the warmth of the sun through the windows and see my father sitting in his underwear on his old green recliner, reading the newspaper from cover to cover. The Grateful Dead envelop me as I find a spot on the porch with my parents and siblings, knowing that I have a great day ahead of me. The Grateful Dead were not just a band to my father, as you've all heard, they were the band. A 30-year catalog where his encyclopedic mind and love of improvisational music could run free in endless combinations of set lists, guitar riffs, and stage chatter. I can easily trace my love of the Grateful Dead back to my father, much like I can connect the dots with most pillars of my own personality to his. But it wasn't just the exposure to the Dead that did it for me. It was the patterns that the Dead represented. Sunny drives exploring New Jersey, family games of Monopoly or Trivial Pursuit, and Sunday mornings together. The born a Dodgers fan in Brooklyn, my father had traded the Bums for the Mets by the time I came around. And while the Grateful Dead are my Sunday morning, the Mets are my summer evenings. Whenever I see a Mets slugger pull off an outside pitch, I hear my dad yell, "What are you swinging at?" Whenever I hear Tim McCarver, I think of my father muting the television and turning on the radio broadcast because he couldn't listen to Tim call a Mets game. And whenever the Mets pull out a clutch win, I look at my phone, expecting my father to call just to say, "Mets win, Mets win," in his best Harry Carey impression. My father would take off work and let me skip school to go to opening day together, when the Mets always looked better than they were. He took me to the last game at Shea Stadium, where we left early and missed the post-game festivities because we couldn't stomach watching the Mets throw away their season on the final day. I became a fanatic because of the patterns that the Mets in baseball represented. Knowing what's important, high expectations, fierce loyalty, and appreciation for conversations that weave easily between past and present, and time together with my father. More than the Grateful Dead and the Mets, my father's clearest pattern was his love for family. He was my mother's constant companion. He built his career with his father and brother, and he was happiest around his kids and grandkids. When he heard that Penina liked dark chocolate, we never lacked for dark chocolate covered pretzels or potato chips. When he saw that my kids loved dolls and cars, any visit to Grandma and Grandpa's was not complete without a new stuffed animal or Hess truck. Coming home from any outing, my father would say to us, "Remember to do it with your kids." He wanted to make sure that what he loved most stayed strong, long after he was the one pulling the strings. One of my father's favorite Dead songs was B11, a complex, fast-paced, early Dead track that the band didn't play after 1970. The song begins, "No more time to tell how, This is the season of what? My father was a man of what? He showed love and connected through what? Be they acid rock bands, disappointing baseball teams, or bits of chocolate. Commenting on our verse about patterns, Ibn Ezra, the 12th century Spanish commentator, talks about different types of forms and notes that the wisdom of the soul is an eternal form. While the whats through which we show love and connect may differ from my father's, the patterns that he created are eternal forms and will last forever through us.
Please rise for the Amalei Rachamim Memorial Prayer.
Malei Rachamim, Shochem Bamromim, Amatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, Alot Kedoshim Utorim Kezorak Yamasirim, Ishmat Menachem David Ben Tia Levi Belea Shalach Lolamo, Gan Eden Tei Menuchato, Anavala Rachamim, Astireu Beseder Knafecha Laolamim, Utzror Bitzrachem Et Nishmato, Adonai Unaflato, Yanuach B'Shalom HaMishkavo, V'Nomar Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Menachem David ben Tia Halevi V'Leah of Mitch Wainer, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that Mitch performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. Adonai is his portion. May Mitch rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. And we remain standing until the casket has left the sanctuary.
Invite all bearers forward, which is nieces and nephews, his friend Steve Blum, cousin Matt Pell. Interment will follow immediately at Mount Freedom Hebrew Cemetery.